to learn and be able to do that. We are live, of course, on Facebook. Happy, healthy, amazing day, friends. Coach Eric here, and I have a question for you today. Are you in hormone hell or in hormone heaven? Hopefully you're more towards the latter, but if you're somewhere in the middle or towards hell, then we want to make sure that you get yourself back to your best self. That's not a pun. That is literally a situation for a lot of people that they're struggling with hormone health. And we're here today with Dr. Brakowski to be able to share strategies with you so you can reverse that situation through holistic means, hopefully for the most part, and have you living your absolute best life. So Dr. Bob, amazing to have you here on this call. I'm going to bring you up on stage, and there you are. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Your camera got readjusted. If you can just drop that down, Dr. Bob. I can't go any lower on this chair, so there you go. Beautiful. So great to have you on the call, Dr. Bob. Always a pleasure to have you educating people on many topics of holistic health and well-being and hormones. This is something that plagues a lot of people when they get it wrong or they have the wrong conditions. So I want to welcome you to this call. We'll try and keep this on point. Of course, if you guys have questions, please drop them in the chat on Instagram. We will be favoring, of course, people who are here live in our group on Facebook. So please let us know how you guys are doing. Hey guys, let us know if you have any questions, and we can open up the question box and have you guys interact with Dr. Bob to get your questions answered on the call. But Dr. Bob, so great to have you here. As always, just knowledge bombs being dropped left, right, and center.
Well, what a beautiful title, right? Heaven or hell. I might take an intermediate point. If you're not in hormone heaven, you're probably approaching hell. So think about it. You know, we have hormones that can make us really happy, like oxytocin, the love hormone, the cuddle hormone. But let's face it, if you don't have much estrogen or progesterone or testosterone, or if your thyroid hormone's not right or your cortisol's not right, it's hard to reach that heaven, even though you might not be in hell just yet. So we want life to be blissful. We want people to enjoy every magic moment, to have all the energy for everything they want to do. And hormones are popular because people have a lot of problems with them. But the solution might not be to give another hormone. It might be to get healthier and let your body regulate the hormones ideally.
This is something that's missed, right? It's something that people assume that they have to take certain routes to be able to chemically induce themselves, to be able to revert or change their situation for the better. But, you know, like most situations, there's always a cost to pay on the flip side of that if it's not done by natural means. So I would want to open out with my first question to you, Dr. Bob, is why is it so important to get an optimum balance with hormones for living our best life?
Well, without them, we're dead. It's really just that simple. And when we start looking at different parts of the life cycle, what you come to realize is, believe it or not, babies need the high stress hormone, the chronic stress hormone, cortisol, to actually have lung maturation. And it actually even stops the cells in their body from, dividing uncontrolled. It's actually called cell differentiation, where they can become essentially anything. Cortisol is critical for that. And preterm babies need to have some cortisol. So we need to know where people are in life and what's the appropriate hormone balance at that point. But here's a simple fact. If you're not feeling quite right, let's start with lifestyle choices rather than shooting the messenger. And the hormones are the messengers. And if we do things right, if we have a nice, healthy pregnancy, and by the way, maybe I shouldn't be giving this shout out, our beautiful friend, Steve Gulia, and his beautiful wife, Amanda, are probably delivering right now. I got a message, the water had broken. So they have a beautiful baby joining us. It'll be a new member of our Organo family. How wonderful. So were their hormones balanced? Yeah. Are they fertile? You bet. Is the world having challenges with that? Way too many, because of the poisons that can disrupt hormones in the body.
Beautiful. I came across one of your slides here on your presentations, Dr. Bob. I wanted to draw up just to get that definition of hormone, or get a picture for you guys as to what this actually, the role of the hormones are in the body. I'd just like you to comment on the Greek word itself, Dr. Bob, for hormones and the connection to everything within the body.
Yeah, I'm such a fan of etymology. How did they come up with this word? What does it mean? And how was it used originally? So notice that from the Greek, it's that which sets in motion. So Einstein said, nothing happens till something moves. When we look at a hormone, it is a broadcast message throughout the entire body, not necessarily every cell type, but seemingly every single system, And the next definition is to impel, to urge on. It sets things into motion and it drives the body into very specific actions. Growth hormone, just that, it promotes growth. Thyroid hormone produces metabolism. Cortisol prevents the inflammatory process. Insulin gets sugar in the cells, and the sex steroids make men and women women. And when they're out of balance, women can be more like men and men can be more like women. And we're beginning to see that, not even beginning to see, we're realizing now that's a real big problem because of things we've done to the environment.
Yeah, big time. With regards to then the overall overarching view then on the hormone system and structures and what is the main components of the hormonal system, obviously we could do this, probably you could lecture on this for a few hours, but I just want to give people some insights into what is the Godfather type perspective on the way our hormonal system works by pulling all these different strings together. And I have a few slides here I'd love you to just touch on as well to kind of help people get that picture of what's going on.
Yeah, it's very, very brilliant that you're showing two things: endocrinology, which is hormones, or intracrinology, which is cell-to-cell communication, or even the cell talking to itself. And so we know that every relationship, and we know this from practical experience in life, every relationship requires good communication. Communication breaks down, we have a problem. That's actually the very first step in cancer, a loss of cell-to-cell communication. So these intracrinology hormones, cells talking to themselves, it's like you saying, "Hey, Eric, you need to step up your game," right? And by the way, you don't need to. You seem to have that good self-talk because your game is always sky high. And then Issa might say, "Eric, you need to calm down. You might be pushing a little hard," right? That's your neighbor talking to you. But what if there's a broadcast message? "Hey, world, get healthier." Wouldn't it be nice if we had that? That's going to be the equivalent of what the hormones are going to do. It's going to be a message that's meant to be perceived by everybody. But if you start talking about the Godfather hormone, understand that first we have to survive. And cortisol, believe it or not, is critical for survival. So is insulin. So is thyroid hormone. We can't live without those. By the way, if you don't have enough growth hormone, well, then you're a dwarf. If you don't have enough thyroid hormone, your brain doesn't develop. You could actually be a cretin with severe mental retardation. If you don't have sex steroids, you're never going to reproduce. And it is a fact that there is a life cycle of hormones, and they all behave on a bell-shaped curve. Some hormones start out high, like cortisol, and they decline later in life naturally. And then certain things start low, like sex steroids. We don't really need those. And I want to put a qualifying factor on that. Little boys have a surge of testosterone in utero for sexual differentiation. Then when they're, an hour old, they don't have raging testosterone, or they'd probably be hard to deal with, and that's pretty quiet until the teen years. And it's very similar with females. They have a surge for sexual differentiation. It goes quiet for a period of time, and then it takes on during the teen years. Now, probably most of our viewers remember teen years. All of a sudden, the opposite sex started looking not only pretty good, but wow, I want to spend as much time and explore that as much as possible. And I don't really know where we get over that. Men tend to have that urge longer than women. It is the urge to survive and thrive. And you put a good graphic up for those that are on Facebook, a very powerful and accurate statement. You're either making stress hormones or sex hormones. So if your body's under super high stress, that's not the time to procreate. That's the time to fight or flee. It's the opposite end of the spectrum, which is rest, digest, repair, and procreate. And there's times for each. There's times we want to fight or flee, if not else, just to make sure that we train that system. And by the way, you're quite good at that, right? Breaking up the variety. And we know that when we push our body responds to how we push. We just don't want to push too far. That's the fine line of humanity there and life.
Yeah. Absolutely. And DHEA, I first heard of this when this is popped up here as well, in a chemist when I was looking for a cream of some kind, a topical cream, and I saw DHEA in it. I was wondering, could you explain what that is and what the relevance is of it then during our life cycle? As you mentioned, there is this cycle that the production starts to decline, and certainly with DHEA. Could you just mention what that is and its significance then with the whole equation of our hormone structure?
Yeah, it is an adrenal hormone, and it's the precursor of most of the other adrenal steroids. And so, it was maybe 30 years ago, DHEA became really, really popular because they realized, wait a minute, its levels drop with age. what do we see about people that have higher levels? And they realized they were healthier, younger, longer. And DHEA has anti-aging benefits, immune benefits, and also when we have it, we can make other things out of it, like the sex steroids, which we need, also different pathways for aldosterone. So where this becomes real critical is after menopause. And I'm gonna make this statement because I words stick when you use them in the right way. And I remember creating a joke one time saying, I don't know why they call it menopause, because women get it too. And people begin to realize that men will have a drop in their sex steroids, and probably for good reason. Carl Jung talked about the phases of life, and that area where testosterone is super high, he called that the warrior phase of life. So how interesting, like the Reishi warriors. And by the way, people look at you and they accuse you because you make really good choices. You're gifted genetically and you do the best you can with what you got. Good for you. Of taking steroids. And how nice to have spent time with you to actually have tested you and go, no, this guy's the real deal. He's all natural. Now, how many people could achieve that level? Well, we can all be better than we are, but let's face it, you've got your unique set of gifts and talents, and thank you for applying them. But DHEA sex steroids will start dropping in the 40s and 50s. And it's said that 50% of a male's androgens, the testosterone, androstenedione, and dihydrotestosterone, come from DHEA after age 50. And it's actually made by the tissues that need it. The testicles are still active, but nowhere near as much. A female after menopause, all of her sex steroids are going to be produced from DHEA, a very small percentage by the adrenal glands and a much higher percentage by the tissues that need it. So it's critical. Now, under stress, DHEA is the first steroid to drop. And how many people have too much stress? It's suggested that maybe everyone, hard to swallow that one, but maybe everyone, just to a different degree. So we control that stress, we make our life better. Lots of ways to make healthier adrenals. Breathe, relax, nourish yourself, good exercise, sun, sleep, you name it. They're all there. But DHEA is life critical for sure.
Nice. And we will be leaning in a little bit more on these points as well, guys. So hang fire. And if you do have questions as well, if you joined late, please hang on till the end. We're going to be addressing questions as well, because I know quite a few people were interested in this topic and have been struggling over a number of months and sometimes years. So we want to make sure these things get rectified sooner rather than later, because you have to pay it that attention now so it doesn't snowball into a situation that you could have avoided. But certainly when it comes then to both men and women, we're both complex creatures, but I think certainly women being more complex, certainly when it comes to the hormone aspect of things. But I would love for you just to touch on some of the markers or some of the situations that people might encounter that would demonstrate that, oh, maybe I am having a hormone circumstance that I need to address with a practitioner.
First, I want to say one of the most insightful things that anybody ever told me, they said, look, women are infinitely complex, men are really simple. And if we actually took our brains out of our heads, a men's brain, a woman's brain, a neurologist could understand who is the woman, because the brain is much more highly interconnected. They don't multitask, but they task switch like champs. And that's why they have the primary nurturing role of babies. But when we start looking at hormones, you start looking every process in the body is affected. If stress hormones are high, you might feel anxious. You might have blood sugar swings, which leads to mood swings. You might start putting on fat excessively. You might not have the energy. You might not have good sleep. And then the stress hormones indirectly have an impact on thyroid hormones, which control the rate of energy production of 99% of the tissues of the body. There's a few that don't use it, like red blood cells. They're not responsive to high thyroid hormones, but without thyroid hormone, thyroid drives the mitochondria. That makes 94.4% of human energy, and that is where fat burning occurs. And it's not very fair, but women have 600% more hypothyroid than men, because there's an interplay between hormones, and estrogens actually suppress thyroid hormone. How? By creating something called thyroid hormone binding globulin. And now they found that there's toxic estrogens in plastics, pesticides injected into animals that also seem to have a negative impact on thyroid hormone. So we start looking at overall energy. We think more thyroid. We think about overall calmness. Then we start thinking about the adrenal glands. We think about growth and repair. That's mostly growth hormone, but certainly the sex steroids have action in there. Secondary sexual development, we are seeing that girls are developing very, very rapidly and boys much slower. And the world sperm count is down exponentially, where infertility is getting to be a big thing. So what are some of the symptoms? Potentially anything and everything could be, but I'll say it again. I don't think hormones are the primary drivers. I actually think what's going on is people are making less than ideal choices. So those on Facebook, you have a nice graph of what is called the obesity estrogen cycle. Charles Poliquin, one of my favorite trainers, a sage of wisdom, he was criticizing the world for giving so many obese men testosterone. And he said it's criminal to give a man testosterone when he's fat. Why? Because fat has an enzyme called aromatase. Aromatase converts testosterone to estrogen. So if you're not addressing cause and effect, you may actually make it worse. When that man makes estrogen, he's more likely to have libido problems, prostate problems, energy problems, and maybe even be led to cancer. The body will be more flabby, less muscular, less energetic. Interestingly enough, insulin resistance, prediabetes, makes men more feminine and women more masculine. If that's the goal, well, you're still not healthier by doing it, right? But we want to keep every hormone balanced.
Yeah, and this is something that I think unless people know some of these markers, whether it's energy, whether it's sleep disturbance, if it's weight gain, it's moodiness, if there's an irregularity there, you should get checked out. You should get your blood work done. Are there particular tests that you would, I know you mentioned about getting certain labs done when people go to visit you in your clinic, Dr. Bob, that you would kind of say, this is, if you're presenting any of these issues, then these are a particular kind of tests you would go and seek out?
Well, there certainly are. And in fact, there's absolutely no limit to the number of tests. And now we run into a little challenge, because if we took most people not feeling well and we looked at all their hormones, we'd probably find several of them off. That's if you're measuring the hormones directly. But what's going on? Are they putting good food in their body? Are they getting a good night's sleep? Are they moving in a meaningful and purposeful way? Do they have a purpose in their life? Do they have hope? And if we go to all the Magnificent Seven, you do need to eat right, drink right, think right, move right, sleep right, poop right, talk right. And Eric, when I take an inventory on those things with people, if they were to rate themselves from 0 being making choices that would kill you tomorrow, and 100 keeping you healthy for as long as you have on this planet, most people are on the bottom half of the scale. And we have a conversation. And I always tell people want the answers to 4 questions. What's causing the problem? And can I help? How long does it take? How much does it cost? My most common answer to what's causing the problem: you, my wonderful friend, haven't made enough healthy choices to manifest the health you deserve. And when we fix that, well, then guess what? Health gets better.
Yeah, straight talk. Yeah, straight talk. At the end of the day, for the most part, we create the conditions we have. There are obviously that percentile of our 10-15% they say of epigenetics, that the other 85% or so, or 90% even, are really how we live our life. So we've got to look at the environments we're in and what's in our environments. And with that idea, I just want to touch on a few things that we've seen as triggers for different autoimmune circumstance, different hormone triggering circumstance as well, from lack of optimal pH, from these xenoestrogens you're talking about, the role of stress as well. So I want to just touch on those points. If we start off with stress then, Dr. Bob, what is this doing to our system if we're not addressing stress? What do you expect to see then over the coming years?
Well, one, let's just be very, very clear that our body, mind, and spirit, our primary role while we're here on Earth is to survive. And stress is essentially perceived as a threat to our survival. And your body says we can't have that. So it releases some very fast-acting hormones, adrenaline, noradrenaline, also known as epinephrine, norepinephrine, also releases cortisol chronically. But very, very simply, it shuts down anything that's not life critical. Is digestion life critical? No. Is sexual function life critical? No. Is joy life critical? No. Is in the acute circumstance immune life critical? No. All those things are shut down when we're in fight or flight. So is growth and repair. So if bodies don't get out of that, things progressively break down. And one of the things that I've, said for decades is pulling the plug on stress may be the most universal starting point that we ever see with people. So guess what? Within our Warrior 30, level 3 is a stress reset. Why? Because we do what things people can do immediately, like change to a healthier coffee or tea, then add some capsules. But once you reset that stress, then you can push your body through more stress by design because you're ready to handle it. But under stress, if you're going to live that way, you're going to die early is a well-known fact, and really not even enjoy the process. And then you also brought up pH. Every single hormone, every enzyme in the body is pH dependent. And by the way, nutrients are enzyme cofactors. So I would often have people come in and they would bring like a shopping bag full of supplements. And they would ask, why with all the supplements that I'm taking, am I still feeling so lousy? Well, sometimes the answer is you're taking lousy supplements. You want to take good stuff from good providers. But more often than that, your body is not in a position to handle it because your acid alkaline balance isn't right. You're too stressed and you're not getting ideal absorption. And so those are things that are high level factors to fix that spill over into every single aspect of health.
Can I just ask on this factor, Dr. Bob? I've heard conflicting information from different individuals about pH and our control over our pH and what actually controls our pH. I heard one person talking a while back about actually a doctor, I believe. I think he was a GP, but also a holistic practitioner as well, talking about the pH of our water and the impact it doesn't have on changing pH levels in the body. Could you just uncover some of those concepts of the impact of water status on pH and also nutrition status on pH? Because those are topics I think people can get lost in, that think, okay, I can just have this and I'm going to optimize my pH. Can you just discuss that, just giving people an overview on that?
Well, we want to understand cause and effect. Now, our body has several ways of making energy, and the way that we make over 94% of it is through something called anaerobic metabolism. Oxygen goes into the cell, carbon dioxide comes out. What happens to carbon dioxide in the blood? It actually forms something called carbonic acid. The chemical form H2CO3 for people that look for that, and that will break into a hydrogen ion, which is an acid, a proton, and HCO3 minus, which is bicarbonate ion. That's the most abundant buffer in the body. Now, I've studied pH for decades. I've taught weekend seminars on just pH. There's at least a dozen buffering systems within the body. There's proteins, there's phosphates, there's minerals, there's enzymes, there's detox enzymes. And then all of our elimination routes get rid of acid. When I exhale and blow off carbon dioxide, when I sweat, that's acid. When I urinate, first morning should be acid. Even bowel movement should be acid. And sometimes people cringe, like, oh my gosh, that would hurt coming out my backside. But understand that the top bug in the gut is called acidophilus, acid loving. So we have lots of ways of getting rid of acid. And so when you start looking, let's say someone were to drink a gallon of very, very alkaline water, which I've had people do this for months on end with very precise testing of the body fluids. Eric, they were shocked to know and very dismayed that their whole body pH nor their buffering systems did not change at all. And then I'll go to a medical literature that said food essentially has very little to do with the amount of acid or alkaline that's added to the body, but it has everything to do with how we drive our systems, how we energize, how we create our buffers, and how we eliminate. And so when we have balanced nutrition, pH ought to be fairly normal, but guess what? Or ideal. Guess who has balanced nutrition? Almost nobody. So people say acid's a big problem. Let me drink alkaline water. I remember the first guy that did it. He bought a $10,000 machine. He says, I'm going to drink a gallon a day. And a month later, he was so mad he wanted to throw it out. And I said, wait a minute, you're drinking a gallon a day. I promise you you're healthier for it. But this is a number that's not going to move. Water's life critical. Clean water is really important. I'm all for clean water. These machines have value. But if you think it's going to change your whole body pH, we need to have a little more education in this process, because it's a very tiny fraction.
Yeah. So really, by getting these alkaline rich foods in, by getting a more alkaline water, it's helping the processes that dictate the pH within the system. Would I be right in articulating it that way?
Yeah. So food is going to build everything, including our buffers, and it's going to drive everything, including our elimination. Now, listen, if you were starving to death, well, part of what would happen, even people that starve to death don't actually technically have something called metabolic acidosis. That's reserved for extreme diabetics who can't get nutrients in the cell. Insulin doesn't get sugar in the cell; it gets nutrients in the cells, and it's life critical. So those are the only people that suffer from what's known as ketoacidosis. But under normal physiologic circumstances, picture, there's people that have gone on sometimes like a 40-day water fast. I can't even imagine what it takes to do that. But do they have acidosis? No, they probably finish off better than they started because they're not making bad choices. At least it's really quite interesting.
Yeah, I've heard a few people. I know you mentioned Steve Goulier earlier. I remember he once told me he did I think a 25 or 30-day water fast. Yeah, I said, wow, I don't know if I'll be trying that anytime soon, but wow, that was intense. I get my 16, 18-hour windows, and I'm like, can bring on the food, but that's just me. Then we talked about stress just briefly as well with the response then to hormones. These decreasing growth hormone, thyroid, and sex hormone function, that just really slows the whole system down, right? It's not really going to be optimized. It's not really going to be producing good source of energy. But what are we looking at then when it comes to our mental capacity, Dr. Bob? Surely this has a spillover into the functions of how we think and how we behave during the day as well, if we're really running on too much stress hormone.
This is an interesting paradox, right? When we need our brain most is probably when we're under the highest stress circumstance, but that's when our brain works the least. I used to go into some very, very challenging tests, and the instructor would say, cool heads prevail. Take a deep breath. And he was exactly right. And even Navy SEALs would do that too. But your brain requires so much energy, so much blood flow that when you're in fight or flight, your body says, okay, I don't need to be able to do high level math right now. I don't need to be the happiest person on planet Earth. I need to run for my life or fight. And so those higher level brain processes shut off. But when you look at the hormones, growth hormone, hey, that's not just growing tall, it's growth and repair. And believe it or not, growth hormone becomes something called IGF-1, which is the body's most powerful fat burner. You need a good liver and growth hormone there to make the difference. Then you start looking at the sex steroids. Well, listen, those are to procreate, and you're not procreating when you're fighting for your life. And thyroid hormone, this is a paradox because you might say, don't I need energy? Not the kind that the thyroid makes. Thyroid makes very slow energy. You want to go for a nice walk? That's your thyroid hormone. You want to go for a sprint? That's the stress hormones, epinephrine, norepinephrine, even cortisol kicks in. And here's a fascinating thing. Under that type of stress, growth hormone increases and actually increases fat burning. So we're remarkable machines. And when we fine tune ourselves, we have the best that life offers. If we neglect, then we pay a price.
Yeah, I love that analogy with being that priceless machine, and being careful of what you surround it, what you put in it, but also what you have around it. And this is another trigger you've talked about multiple times on different calls, Dr. Barr, these xenoestrogens and different toxins that are in household products that we're around every single day or maybe. And these are certain things we should look out for in everyday products that you might see around your house that you could maybe avoid as well. I just love you just to speak to these phthalates in plastics or these parabens, and also some of the toxic estrogens or xenoestrogens that people have come across, whether it's on simple things like receipts or plastics that are wrapped around their foods.
Yeah, how crazy is that? So, if we start with phthalates, the most disturbing article I read, here was the title of it: Phthalate-Induced Testicular Dysgenesis. That was in the peer-reviewed medical literature, and they exposed animals to phthalates to see what would happen to the male reproductive system. It didn't develop. And do you think that might affect your life? Do you think that might affect your sexual identity? If you don't have that which makes you a man, why would you feel like a man? Then we go the other end of the extreme, and we've got these xenoestrogens. And you might think, well, okay, that would make you more feminine. but they're not as strong as human estrogens, but they can compete for binding with the estrogen receptors. So women may have symptoms of low levels of estrogen, even though they're profoundly toxic to estrogen. And in fact, now that they've done the human toxin inventory, it's suggested that everybody walking around has toxic estrogens, xenoestrogens, metalloestrogens in their system. And there was a quote from the 90s, and this was it: "We are swimming in a sea of estrogens." And even the term metalloestrogens is out there. So lead, cadmium, mercury, nickel, tin. And I tell people the modern skeleton has 500 to 1,000 times the lead of pre-industrialized humans. We'll get to questions later, but a woman got a shot, a vaccine, we'll call it a vaccine, and developed autoimmunity. And she said, what's going on here? If you go to PubMed.gov and type in vaccine-induced autoimmunity, you will find, I believe it's over 3,000 studies going back over 60 years. They've known that vaccines can induce autoimmunity. Now, what they were saying up on today is, well, the risk of that is less than the benefit from the shot. But I think more people are beginning to question that. Is that really true for everybody with every shot? And I will encourage people, be very diligent about understanding anything that you put in your body and what it can do.
Just speaking of different adjustments then in the body, I'd love to ask your opinion, because this is quite a difficult topic for some people to fathom. But giving kids the option to alter their chemical structure from an early age, I'd love to know your thoughts on that. What do you see could be problematic for that individual later on down the road if they're given a choice like that so early when they're in that developmental phase, that it could really lead a lot of people down a very slippery slope when it comes to their full potential and growth and healthy growth as a human?
Where do you even go with that? And so, in the U.S., we've had mass shootings. And in the last year, 4 of those shootings were from people that had hormone alteration. They were identifying as trans. And very few people, there's censorship in the media. That's very, very clear. So Patrick Bet-David, PBD, I love his podcast. He's one of the most popular out there, somewhere between 3 and 4 million subscribers. But he said this, way back when, if someone didn't know if they were a man or a woman, they were considered mentally ill. Now, could there be people, that maybe that would be an appropriate change for them, given how they're living their life? I'm open to any possibility for anybody at any time, but that's for an adult to make that decision when you're permanently altering. And when you start messing with the hormones early, we don't know what's going to happen. So Jordan Peterson talked about the very first trans case. And Eric, it was very, very tragic. And in fact, this family was on Oprah way back when. But this family had twin boys in Canada. And when they were going to do a circumcision, the machine malfunctioned and they cut off one of the boys' penises. They just cut off his penis. And the family was so devastated and said, what do we do? Well, their doctor wanted to do an experiment. He said, look, here's what we'll do. We'll remove everything. We'll take off the testicles. You'll raise that baby as a girl. And then in the teen years, we'll start giving hormones. And this person, no one will know the difference. They'll just grow up as a girl. Well, this boy ultimately realized he wasn't a girl, even though he got married, had a horrible existence, committed suicide. And by the way, so was his brother. But that was what they were touting as the idea that people can grow healthy even if they alter their sexual identity. But here's what we know. Our sexual identity is being stolen by endocrine toxins. If the more you're exposed to and the less you deal with it, the more you're affected. And Eric, if we look at this, we see that there's a lot of people in the world that say, yeah, I'm not sure if I'm supposed to be a boy, even though you've been given that anatomy. I'm not sure if you're supposed to be a girl. And to make it even worse, they have people testifying before Congress. The doctor just takes a guess. Is it a boy? Is it a girl? Well, let's guess. And believe it or not, I know as ridiculous as I lost count, but I lost count at 2. Some are saying that there's like 80 genders. I don't understand that. Every other species has 2. Even vegetables have two. Even minerals have a male and a female. So what's going on with humans? Well, either we're nuts or we're nuts. I don't have an or. We're nuts. That's all there is to it. You're just not you're not mentally sound to try to erase all history and rewrite your own facts.
Yeah, I'm seeing some of those clips as well of those. Sorry, I shouldn't have those clips of those athletes that are competing with, in the standard female leagues and just busting shoulders and are hurting other female athletes. And you're like, how is this actually happening? Like, one thing if someone is making a personal choice and they're an adult, of course, and doing their own thing, and more power to them, I guess. But if someone's in a sporting activity and they are obviously operating on a different hormonal structure, I mean, that's such a huge advantage, and it taints sports really as well. And it kind of puts people, I guess, people who are working hard for years, let's say 10, 15 years, trying to get ahead in events. And then all of a sudden, because of some kind of a loophole or change in public paradigms or the way things should be, these women are getting injured because of
and sometimes severely. They let a guy in a cage to fight a woman, and he crushed her skull and she nearly died. That's not a fair fight. Listen, we're different. We're different for a reason. That's why we have different groups. But the worst one, and then we get on to health again, but they had a 50-year-old male, profoundly mentally ill, identifying as a 13-year-old girl, and he joined the girls' swim team and was in the locker room showering with 13-year-old girls and competing against them as a 50-year-old male. What's wrong with the parents? What's wrong with the coaches? What's wrong with the school system? We don't want to make too many political comments, but we have a former U.S. president that's being assaulted for no reason by a very corrupt legal system. And in New York, no crime, no victim. They just fined him, almost half $1 billion and put him out of business for 3 years. And truckers said, you know what? We may not like him, but we know this is wrong. We're not going to deliver any goods to New York. We're not going to pick up anything up for New York. I say if we all stick with that, if someone's going against our value system in a way that's hurting humanity, why don't we band together? Enough is enough. And I think we're at that critical point now where, okay, even people that were so against Trump are saying, yeah, I don't like Trump at all. Never did. But this is not right. Time to set it right.
Yeah, certainly when we take a pivot back to just the issues, then there's all the different kind of challenges that can arise, and certainly one that really stood out for me again when it comes to hormone regularity and balance is sleep. And you mentioned before on multiple calls about if you have 4 or 5 nights sleep. I think there was a study done that you're legally drunk if you're 2 hours suboptimal sleep for 4 or 5 or even 6 nights in a row. You get behind the wheel of a car, your operating system, i.e. your brain, is legally drunk. And, when you look at different things like dopamine, that's our happy hormone, right? Is keeping things working very well with the brain. But this really takes a knock if we're running on less than optimal sleep. And this seems to be quite common, are people who don't sleep enough. And once they get that wrong, it tends to trigger and trickle down the pipeline.
Yeah. It's so fascinating. I just saw Johnny Oduya joined. Hey, Johnny, 2-time Stanley Cup winner, an epic human, a tremendous beast, good for humanity, adding health to the world. Now, Johnny, if you want to join us, it'd be fun to bring you on stage because you're such an animal. I love and appreciate you. But when we start looking at this poor sleep, now I'll go back to Johnny for a moment. He was at a seminar I was teaching in Sweden. And the Chicago Blackhawks had a sleep coach come in. They said, look, you're under high stress. You're not going to perform well. You've got to get some good sleep. But when you talk about dopamine, it's not just joy. That's in a section of the brain called the nucleus accumbens. In the frontal cortex, it's concentration. And another section of the brain, it's called substantia nigra. And that's fine motor control, like Parkinson's. I had a new patient today who went through a very stressful circumstance. She had an adverse reaction to medication, which was a dopamine med. And now she's got like whole body Parkinson's, and she's asking me, can we make this better? Well, my answer is always the same. I don't know, but we'll try. So what are we going to do about that? Well, we got to clear. It was a toxic reaction. Thank God she's not doing it anymore. We got to clear that out and hopefully we reestablish. But stress, it's toxic. Do we clear it out? We can, but we got to pull the plug on the stress. So we often use melatonin, which, by the way, will decrease the brain drive of stress on the adrenals. We use theanine, which calms the brain. That's a natural GABA facilitator. And then we use our reishi spores, which it took them till 2022 to realize. They knew it made people feel better. They knew it drove the parasympathetic nervous system, but it actually reduces the amount of circulating cortisol in the bloodstream. We call that the stress reset. And it's very, very powerful.
Beautiful. I just wanted to just touch on as well, if people are getting older as well, just, I have sometimes certain female clients would message me and ask about thyroid function, or that mentioned they're on a HRT protocol to kind of help them with that transition. I would love you just to, from a functional medicine standpoint, Dr. Bob, as people do get older, and of course you mentioned andropause as well. Could you just touch on the possibility then of supplementing like the likes of DHEA and other natural compounds to replace the likes of a HRT practice?
Sure. By the way, DHEA is a hormone. It is a hormone, even though it's over the counter in most countries, and it's the precursor to most of the sex steroids, or to all of them. But since your body's going to make sex steroids from DHEA, some of the medical literature has called it physiologic hormone replacement of choice. Now, since it makes hormones, people say, could that be risky for hormone-related cancer? Which, guess what? Breast cancer, most popular cancer, I want to call it popular, the most prolific cancer in women, 1 in 8, prostate cancer, 1 in 6. They're hormone-related. Prostate, they used to blame testosterone. I think now the emerging evidence is it's a lot more of an estrogen phenomena. But the European journal is very, very clear. It calls DHEA an anti-carcinogen. So that would be a much, much, much safer choice. But, we see so many ladies in particular, and I think our society maybe has more demands. Women are more stressed. They seem to have a harder challenge. They're certainly infinitely complex. And plenty of doctors are very quick to say, well, let's give you some estrogen. Let's give you some progesterone. Let's give you some thyroid. Let's give you some testosterone. We've got one doctor in Houston, Texas, that's what he does. He puts everybody on all 4 of those. And then sometimes I'm hired to clean up the mess. It's like, wait a minute, my body can't regulate itself anymore. Here's the guidelines for hormones. If you're going to take them, you want to use the lowest dose, shortest duration. And I'm even going to qualify that. You want it to be bioidentical, your same hormone. But Eric, if you do bioidentical, your body knows how to handle that. It clears it out very, very fast. So why did they do these synthetics? They last longer. And what does that mean? It means they're more toxic. I mean, sometimes people get a pellet and it'll last months. Are you confident about that regulation? What's your long-term cancer risk? Time will tell. But here's what we know. If we're going to do a medication, lowest dose, shortest duration with good guidance, but always addressing the reason that we're low in hormones to begin with. And it's not that you're 50, 60, 70, or 80. I gave a talk this week in Houston. I pulled up the data from the Blue Zones. Good week for Valentine's week to show that. But they had 80% of 100-year-olds in the Blue Zones still sexually active. So are they taking foreign hormones? No. Are they making their own? Yeah. And why are we studying them? Because they're healthy for 100 years. And I promise you, it's not a drug protocol for them. It's get connected with your purpose in life, eat good, have a beautiful community, make the world better, and enjoy the process. And those are words to live by.
Hell yeah. Just on the last point then with thyroid function, because I know that comes up, hypo or hyperthyroid then, for especially seemingly with women, that the likelihood of those circumstances, I believe, is much higher because of, being female. But do you see that often? I know you talked about different autoimmune circumstances before, like Hashimoto's,
yep,
and of course hyperthyroidism. What are your typical protocols then for trying to address these at root cause from a functional medicine standpoint, rather than going down the route then of those pharmaceutical interventions?
So the thyroid hormone or thyroid gland is considered the most environmentally sensitive gland in our body. That means that stress will be harder on it, toxins will be harder on it, malnutrition is harder on it, food reaction is hard on it, infections can be hard on it. All of these can trigger autoimmunity. But keep in mind, the body doesn't one day say, oh, I know I need my thyroid to live a good life, but I don't like it anymore, I'm going to kill it. That doesn't happen. So, it was published decades ago that cell injury precedes autoimmune disease. Either it can become physically traumatized, it can become intoxicated, it can become infected, a number of different mechanisms. But once that happens, the body says, okay, I don't like this cell anymore. It's no longer safe for me. So I'm going to clear it out. And women, they're going to have 600% more thyroid problems than men because estrogen inhibits thyroid and estrogens promote autoimmunity. And that's why, 80% is the standard assessment of how much autoimmunity exists in women than it does in men. And all the good reason to take care of our ladies. They are infinitely complex, and we should honor them and take good care of them, do the best we can to create a low stress, nourished world for them. Wouldn't it be a better world if we did that? But we seem to have people that aren't honoring them like they should be. And you know what? Let's start at home. Let's honor our ladies and everybody we meet and do all we can to let them know how special they are, and our world would be nothing without them.
There we go. Estrogens then being a big problem across the board, especially these xenoestrogens. I remember you sharing this protocol of your estrogen detoxification, which of course includes our number one medicinal mushroom superfood, reishi, of course, in there as well. Can you just mention just one or two touch points then on this detoxification process? And then we're just going to wrap up the call then. Just particularly looking at the power of medicinal mushrooms when it comes to detoxification and also helping hormone regulation in the body. So
without getting too complicated, because I've taught full day seminars on this. So let's just be clear. There's 11 different liver enzymes that start the process of estrogen clearance. And then there's another phase 2, where you need good nutrients to clear it out, including methyl groups, glucuronic acid, sulfate groups, and too many people are low on those. But there's one category of estrogen clearance that is very, very healthy, and that's actually driven by coffee and cruciferous vegetables, broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, cabbage. They drive something called cytochrome P450-182. That creates something known as 2-hydroxyestrogens. Then it can be neutralized with the methyl sulfate or glucuronic acid. So what we find is that the reishi specifically increases healthy estrogen clearance in not just the estrogens that bodies make, but also the xenoestrogens like bisphenol A, like the phthalates, and it also increases the clearance of metals. There's a protein in the body called metallothionein proteins, and reishi increases that by 800% after a few weeks of consistent dosing. So, reishi has been proven to help the body clear some of the most toxic compounds in the history of the planet. And it also is very, very good at clearing the things that we're dealing with daily. So we see plenty of people, they're going to start some reishi and they go, holy cow, I'm losing weight. My energy's better. I'm sleeping better. Why? Because the symptoms of chronic poisoning, fatigue, sleep disturbance, intestinal distress, allergy symptoms, headaches, confusion, and anxiety. And all of those have the potential to get better by enhancing detox, and reishi improves all the pathways.
Yeah, and certainly when it comes to the brain chemistry as well and how that regulates hormone function. I love this slide when it comes to just creating that sense of balance and peace. And the beauty with medicinal mushrooms being these components called adaptogens, which help adjust to what our body needs and figures out that whole complex process that is us. And I love the documentary Fantastic Fungi. I've watched it again recently, and just the knowledge, the ancient wisdom stored within these molecules, in these medicinal mushrooms, that just listen. They really listen to what we need. And I just find that's really beautiful and such an incredible way to be able to help people to deal with a lot of these challenges, whether it's mental fatigue, whether it's your mood, it's your regulation, it's your digestion, it's your energy production. There's so many things, but I just think if you get this right and you get that sense of inner peace and happiness in place, then everything else kind of falls closer into place as a consequence of that.
Yeah, it surely does. And they found someone frozen in some of the mountains. I don't know if it was on Everest or somewhere, but they looked, and part of what this guy packed was mushrooms, because it was good for the immune system. There were so many different things that could do it. And how humanity figured this out, I don't really know. But Fantastic Fungi, if you haven't watched it, you might want to watch it right now. medicinal mushrooms. We're not talking food grade mushrooms, medicinal mushrooms, a $30 billion a year market expected to go to 50 billion. Well, why is it growing? Because these things are known to be very, very helpful. I'm going to put a question on the screen. I think I can put that up there. And this poor woman, I'm glad she's not identified here. You know, she had a booster shot and suddenly she developed lupus and other problems that no one should have to deal with. But Eric, there was a study, March of 2020, and what they found is if they, the virus was much worse early on. Then as it mutated, it became less and less and less problem. So by March of 2020, they did a study out of China. And if people were given traditional Western medicine, there was an 18% death rate. Huge, huge number. If they just added traditional Chinese medicine, of which reishi is the top traditional Chinese herb, the death rate went from 18% to 0.6%. 6 of 1,000 compromised individuals with the worst form of the virus. That was the death rate, which would be less than a typical flu. And, what if the world knew about that right away? Now, it was published. I think whoever published it wanted to get it out there. Interestingly enough, when I put it on Facebook, they struck it and put me in jail, Facebook jail, that is, for peer-reviewed literature. So, by the way, we're streaming on Facebook. I would love for them to clean up their act, and I'd love an alternative. But, let's face it, we've been sold information that wasn't in our best interest, and people are waking up. This poor testimonial, if you're reading it, after the J&J booster, my immune system goes into self-aggression direction with lupus, also known as systemic lupus erythematosus. And there's so many autoimmune circumstances triggered by that. Last I searched, you look at this most recent shot in autoimmunity, hundreds of studies, and it's only been out for a few years. And I'm seeing about 80% of the people. Now, people are coming into me. They're saying, I had my shot. I never felt better. About 80% of those people, just with a generalized screening for autoimmunity, we see that they have it. And what do we do about it? Well, if you got the spike protein producing source, you might do a nicotine patch or lobelia or ginkgo and do enzymes to dissolve it. And that's proven. I have, if you go to my Dr.Bob_Rakowski YouTube channel and type in long vax, that's what they're calling it. Not only long COVID, but long vax. You'll see a solution for it.
Beautiful. I didn't actually, it seems the rest of that comment has shrunk. I can't seem to open it if there is a question on the end of that. Okay. It just blocks it out at the end. It's like it runs out of space. But if you do have a particular question on that, please maybe pop up in the chat, in the comments. I believe her name is Emily. If you could do that, would be great. But guys, any other questions on Facebook, just in regards to hormones specifically, if you can, just before we wrap up? Lots of knowledge and new ideas being dropped there today. Any closing comments then from yourself, Dr. Bob, what you see being some of the best strategies then for people to optimize their hormone health? Just a recap on the key points we touched on, and maybe a call to action then for people to start making better steps towards those or making that a reality, I should say.
Dean Ornish was interviewed a few decades ago, and he was asked, why aren't people healthier? Why are we so sick? And he said, look, we're looking in the wrong direction. We've got a wrong paradigm. But here's what he said: sustainable changes must be pleasurable. So, if you hate doing something, well, you're not likely to do it. When you start looking at coffee and tea, this is where convenience wins, right? We've got it reishi infused. People consume it multiple times a day. They're better. I'm going to give another big shout out to Warrior 30. I mean, you talk about 30 days of great variety, great guidance, great pace, great recovery for flexibility, strength, cardio, better motion, better flow. I'm going to encourage you all, go to reishiwarriors.com, sign up for Warrior 30, and let's make the world healthier. And by the way, what's part of that? You're going to change your coffee or tea. And once you see what it does for you, I think you're going to be beyond happy. So the call to action is simple. Go to reishiwarriors.com, sign up for Warrior 30. If someone referred you to this, guess what? We have partners all over the world. We honor their business. We're happy. If you join us, we're happy to build your business, but go back to whoever referred you and say, I want some reishi infused coffee or tea. By the way, we got a lot of other things to offer too, but that's a good start. So that would be the call to action. Join ReishiWarriors.com, go to Warrior 30, show us the before and after. I think you're going to be more than pleased.
Beautiful. And just for reference, guys, if you just seen this call for the first time or you're new to the concept of reishi infused products, we have, of course, Dr. Bob's Stress Reset for people who are really, really looking to make that a shift in their stress. And then, of course, the complete line of reishi infused beverages that we love to share. Beautiful delivery system for health. Never seen anything like it as a coach. Probably never will, because like you said before, convenience is certainly king with compliance, Dr. Bob. You can have all kinds of ideas and nutritional strategies and health strategies, but if it's not rooted in a daily habit, you're going to have to develop that new habit. And this was such a beautiful way to not only improve my overall health, my family's health, but also to create a positive ripple around the world. And I'm delighted that you've been able to, we've been able to merge your skill sets for this Warrior 30 challenge and be able to just give a condensed experience for people to get them out of that stress circumstance, get them out of that immobile circumstance, and just get people up and moving and more educated on what they really should be doing every single day to live their best life and pass that on to their families, because I think that's really important.
Oh, it really is, and let's face it. I would often, when we were talking about hormones, we were talking about stress, I would ask people, put yourself in your body when you're in your best physical shape, your best mental shape, when your life is going well, and think about how you feel and how you manage stress at that moment in time. Then put yourself in the worst physical condition when you're sleep deprived, when you're not eating well. How do you manage stress? And most people know the difference is night and day. So what do we need to do? We need to make more of those choices: eating right, drinking right, thinking right, moving right, sleeping right, pooping right, walking right. What we show on the outside is reflective of what's happening on the inside. Don't ever forget that. And if your outside is not where you want it to be, chances are your inside's not either. And we've got strategies for both.
Beautiful. Just to wrap, I believe that lady who had the adverse reactions there was asking about the volume of reishi to take in her case. Would that be a spores?
Yeah, I like two spores every waking hour. That's a good start. And by the way, reach out to me if that works. Great. If it doesn't, wherever you are in the world, we can do a virtual. We can set you up with partners. We can move you forward. That would be a paid consult, because I do that for a living as well. But for free, start the spores, connect with whoever referred you to every waking hour, typically 7 to 10 days. We've seen changes that are, I would say most people would consider them too good to be true. Find out for yourself, share the results with all of us here, because I know you're going to get better. How much better? Time will tell. You certainly won't be worse for it.
Beautiful. So yeah, please reach out to Dr. Bob if you need that individual consult, because sometimes you need to go a little bit deeper. And of course, these beautiful compounds are a great shield through that battle we go to getting better every single day. So Dr. Bob, thank you so much for this knowledge and your time and your wisdom and love for people to help them to get to where they want to go. Guys, so great to have you here on this call, engaging with us. And of course, on Instagram. If you're not already in our group, drop us a DM saying, add me. We'll get you into the group so you can absorb more of the information we shared today. So guys, ciao for now. Dr. Bob, thank you so much. We will circle back on Thursday for conversation around abundance and entrepreneurship and how all of these things work so beautifully together. So you can join us same time, 6:30 GMT or 12:30 CST on Thursday, if you're open to learn more about those ideas. So Dr. Bob, thank you once again. Guys, see you soon.
Thank you always.